Okay, y'all, thank you for joining us. We are doing a live feed here. Some of you may be watching this not live, so I apologize if this is not live for you. But for my live audience, we're going to be doing a webinar today on basically a reliable source of power for you in case of emergency. Tim and I are going to give you some advice on basically a good, better, best of reliable power. We're also going to sprinkle that with some good prepper advice. Tim and I aren't full preppers, I wouldn't say, but we are at least mini preppers at a minimum, wouldn't you say, Tim?
At least we understand the concept.
We definitely get the concept.
Yeah.
So if you don't know me, my name is Matt Reisinger. I'm a builder down in Austin, Texas. Tim Hill is my business partner. He's half of Reisinger Build. He's the smarter and more handsome half. Tim's been a builder for 40 years. I've been a builder for 30 years. We've gone through a lot of outages and a lot of camping and a lot of emergency situations. So we have some good experiences to relay to you. Anything I missed on your pedigree, Tim?
No.
Eagle Scout.
There is that.
And been involved with scouting for a long time, and he certainly learned a lot through that. And honestly, a lot of what we're talking about today I've learned from Tim. As a side note, I'll also frankly need to shout out my buddy Wrangler Star, another YouTuber that I've learned a lot from as well. A few of these items on the table were recommendations of his from a video he published not too long ago. But you know, this time of year, hurricane season rolls around. All the companies that sell anything to do with preparedness all of a sudden see a spike in sales. And it always makes me second guess, hey, have I really thought through everything? So Tim and I are going to try and give you some good advice on that. We've got a little PowerPoint, so why don't we kind of first start here. So Tim, the first thing we want to talk about is why is it important? I mean, what is the importance of having thought about reliable power ahead of time in your mind?
Well, it's a great question, Matt. I think this year alone we've had 10 hurricane systems
Oh my gosh.
make landfall. And of course the most recent devastating one was Milton.
Yeah.
And the people that have experienced that certainly understand the need for backup systems or resilient systems for their living conditions, and reliable power source is part of that.
Yeah, that's right, for sure. In a modern society too, I mean, with just being out for a short period of time or being out for a long period of time, thinking about it ahead of time is the way to go. And you know, we're going to try and touch on kind of, as I mentioned earlier, good, better, best, but also, frankly, cheapest to most expensive in terms of thoughtfulness, preparedness, and frankly, just dollars out of your pocket to prepare for that. But if you look at this list right here on why this is this is important, I mean, so many of these stand out to me. But certainly, if you've got elderly folks living with you and you've got medical equipment at home, obviously that's a really big deal. Refrigerators and freezers, I mean, you can only go, frankly, a couple of hours in an outage, especially if you've got extreme conditions, before things are going to start going bad and you got to throw it out. So thinking about this ahead of time and really spending the time ahead of time is super important. Let's look at the immediate effects here. I mean, obviously, you're going to lose your lights, you're going to lose your heating and cooling, internet access. Probably any type of security system you have is going to go out. It may have some type of backup power, but it might just be an uninterruptible power supply, which is usually a very short-acting type of battery. As you get into longer power losses, you know, a couple of hours of time, you're draining your phone, your laptop's going to run out of battery. It might start getting hot or cold in the house. Move that up to something like a day, and your fridge now all of a sudden is start getting warm. You're probably going to start thinking about throwing some things away. The frozen foods are thawing out there in the freezer. If you've got medications that need to be refrigerated, they may start actually degrading. Beyond that, you know, we're talking about 2 days lost now. Now we really have food spoilage. We also probably have some pretty decent amount of discomfort in your house. And you know, as a dad of 4 kids, that's something that's really a big one for me. I forgot to mention, I'm just realizing this too, Sergey posted a Q&A for us. We are going to have Q&A time. I forgot to mention this. Go to the Q&A tab on your Zoom link, and you can actually type a question that I'll see. Sergey's got a question here we're going to answer in a little bit. Great question, Sergey. So if you've got a question, go to the Q&A tab where no one's monitoring chat, but Q&A is the place to do it. And by the way, I have a couple of Champion folks on the backside. This is a Champion sponsored event. And so if you have some specific Champion questions, they can answer that. But Tim and I are going to try and answer the bigger and the broader questions. I actually have some photos, by the way, of the Texas Freeze from 2021, and I've got some good, Tim and I both have some really good stories from both our houses, some customers' houses, and some friends' houses from that period of time. And that freeze in particular was an interesting one because some people lost power, like me, for about 80 hours, but some of our clients and some people that we know in town lost power for an entire week. So that was a particularly interesting event. And then you think about that on multiple days, which is certainly happening in as a result of the hurricanes right now, especially in North Carolina. And things get pretty serious, and there's absolutely some bigger term effects. So let's think about this term power independence. Really, what is that, and what are the key components to power independence? That could be backup generators, that could be solar panels, that could also be some type of storage system, a battery system. That also could be, your giant propane tank that's buried, your gasoline that you've got in your shed. That's a form of power storage. And how do we approach that? How do we plan for that power independence? Thinking about those alternative sources of power and how they're interconnected is really an important thing for us prior to the start of those events. Interestingly enough, during that big power outage that we had in Texas in 2021, I think there was quite a few people that didn't realize that either their battery that they had that was attached to their solar wasn't sized properly because they used a lot more juice than they thought, and they didn't make it through an entire night. And the other thing that happened is a lot of people's solar went down because they didn't realize there was going to be snow and ice on their solar panels. And making solar in July is one thing, making solar in dark skies and snow-covered panels is a whole different thing. So we're going to kind of talk through a little bit of that approach and also talk about what some of our clients are doing too on builds, because we got some interesting stuff going on right now.
We do.
Okay, so power independence. Let's start right here. Tier 0. This is really somebody who didn't think about it. The grid went down at their house. They weren't really prepared. I got to say, this was in where I lived in Austin at the time, or where I live in Austin at the time. I would say this is frankly most of my neighbors. I was a little bit shocked by how unprepared most people were. I mean, maybe they had this for their cell phone, a 10,000 milliamp, Anker charger, which is great, but you're only going to charge your cell phone maybe once with this. So, I mean, if you're out for 24 hours, maybe this is going to get you through, maybe not. Okay, maybe you get the double size version. This is 20,000 milliamps. But again, this is not going to charge your phone more than a day or two. And if I'm using my laptop or trying to work or trying to get internet, this isn't going to do much for me. This is really not much. This is, in my book, this is basically tier 0. And there's obviously lots of cons with that. So what's the first tier, Tim? That's where we're going to start right now.
Well, first tier is just the basic fundamentals of some larger backup portable battery bank.
Yep.
Like the ones that we'll feature here or talk about. You may have some photos.
Yep.
They're usually based on a lithium-ion or lithium phosphate battery internally, and it has a built-in inverter, usually 1,000 watt or 1,500 watt, which is enough to run a small refrigerator for a period of time, some fans, maybe a space heater for a short period of time.
Yeah.
But those are really a short period duration solution,
Yeah, that's
not
right.
really a long-term solution.
Yeah.
Right.
On this presentation, we kind of said there's kind of 3 tier 1 temp sources, and this one would categorize for tier 1, especially if you have several of them and not just one of them.
Right.
But starting with Champion, and of course this could go to other manufacturers as well. But on my left is that Champion 2,500 watt generator. Let me actually show these guys this one, Tim. I'm going to bring it over just a little bit. We'll pop it right on top here.
Okay.
This unit is what I lovingly refer to as a suitcase generator. you know, it weighs about the same as a suitcase that you might drop into the airlines. They're like 50-ish pounds for a guy like this. 2,500 watts when it starts, so it can actually crank something up. It's probably closer to 2,000 running watts. I'd have to check the exact specs.
Right.
But on a suitcase generator like this, you're typically going to get 2 plugs that are both 110 plugs. And one big plug, no pun intended, for Champion is they make a lot of dual fuel products.
Right.
So this came with this generator of mine. And you can see here, this just plugs right into a propane tank. And on the other end, I've got a protective cap on it. But if I pop this cap off, you're going to see right here, it drops in right here. And now instead of running on gas, I can actually run this off propane. So that's a really nice device. The other nice thing about this device, frankly, Tim, is cost. I mean, these are only a couple $100.
Right.
This is not a super expensive unit. This is not going to break the bank. And I've used these suitcase generators a lot camping because my small RV, if I'm not using the air conditioner, this will easily power everything I need in my
Yeah, just
RV.
about everything except refrigeration or air conditioning equipment. It'll
In the
run
house.
Fine. That's
yeah,
right.
That's right. The other model from Champion that kind of fits in this tier 1 is this, and this is what Tim was talking about. This is a power station. It's an inverter generator. So basically there's a big battery on the bottom, and then there's a DC to AC inverter, right? It's converting the DC power from the battery to AC power. And this is pretty cool because if you look on the left here, it may be a little hard to see on camera there, you can plug right in here and get 60 watts of DC power right out of this thing to power your laptop. So a lot of your smaller portable electronics, you don't even need to turn the inverter on. We can just go right from the big battery here. Charge your phone. I can run my MacBook off this. I have a lot. You also have a cigarette lighter type on there. And then the other side, we got to actually press a button to turn the inverter on. And then check it out. I've got 3 outlets on here. So this is pretty cool. The other thing about this, Tim, that's neat is you can charge this with a solar panel if you were camping, and you can also tie them together. And as a matter of fact, I happen to have a couple of photos. Let's scroll ahead here. Tim got a camper before me, and we kind of both got into the camper lifestyle for vacations a couple years ago. Glamping, as my wife likes to call it.
Right.
And I got to tell you, it's been super fun, but it's also been a great teacher for me on how to live independently, especially when there's no power. So the camper has actually taught me quite a bit. Oops, I scrolled past that. For instance, the power station there, that little battery-operated inverter generator there, it's shockingly able to do a lot for you in a camping and a tailgate situation. But think about this in a backup power situation. There's no gasoline, there's no fumes. I could have this on my countertop, and look at this photo of me with a buddy. I think we were doing paintballing that day with our boys. I set up a coffee station. I ran my coffee maker, my grinder. It made no noise. No, it wasn't bothering our conversation. It's just sitting right there on the table. So if we had a power outage that was a short one, that actually could be really handy. Also, I've used it on the photo on the right there. I think that was at Big Bend National Park. Use that just for making breakfast in the morning, right? It'll even run a toaster. There's quite a bit of power you can get out of these things. So that can be really handy. The other cool thing about these, Tim, is they make a coupling kit, because you saw it's only got 110 outlets on there that are probably 15 amp 110 outlets. You can couple 2 of them together. It's a little hard to see in this photo. It's the black thing in the center there. And then you can have a 120 30 amp outlet out of that.
It's a parallel connection.
Exactly, it's a parallel connection, which is pretty cool. And they make parallel kits for their gas generators as well. But let's talk about that fuel source that we mentioned a little bit earlier. You know, something I didn't know until later in life was that propane is basically a non, what's the word I'm looking for, expiring fuel source, or a non-degrading fuel source over time.
That's right.
So, you know, you bury your 500-gallon tank. That's a photo from a job site years ago. We put a tank in the ground in. I think that's a 500. That actually might be a little bigger than a 500. That might be 1,000. The point is that could be buried in the ground, and that propane's not going bad. 10 years from now, that propane's still able to give you the same BTUs. And another thing I don't think everybody knows is that the barbecue pit size exchangeable propane tank, like in that photo there next to that Champion dual fuel, that's a standard size, but that's not the only size. You can easily go to a propane dealer or even order off the web bigger size tanks and have those filled locally. So what you're seeing there is I think that's a 50 and 100 pound cylinder behind that Champion as well.
Right.
And then let's talk gasoline storage as well for a minute. I think that's what my next photo is here. No, it's not. Hang on one second. Where's my gasoline storage? Let's talk gasoline storage on the other hand, because this is also something I learned from Tim. Gasoline is an expiring agent. And you want to actually talk through this one, Tim?
Well, gasoline certainly has a shelf life. It degrades over time. There are certain additives you can add to storage gasoline to make them degrade slower, but they still will degrade. Eventually, they turn to varnish.
Yeah.
But certainly small power devices, small generators and small internal combustion engines don't like the modern ethanol gasoline because it makes them burn too hot.
Yep.
And so if you're going to purchase gasoline for use in a small device, certainly buy the ethanol-free gasoline.
Whenever
there are
possible.
some service stations that sell it at a price slightly higher than regular ethanol gasoline. You can buy it at some of the big box stores, but it's extremely expensive when you do that. Now, of course, the grade of gasoline that they sell at those stores is very, very high, but I'm not sure you need that.
Like the kind that you get in a can, right? That's I forget the brand name that I see that all the time at the hardware store. But you can buy an ethanol-free, really high-grade gas by the gallon, but it's at least triple the price.
That's right.
My preference is to go to a local station. In fact, in Texas, if you're in Texas, Buc-ee's sells ethanol-free. QT sells ethanol-free, and I've seen it at some Walmart gas stations as well.
That's right.
I don't know if that's true for the rest of you in the nation, but if you're a Texan, those are some options. And just my own, I guess, advice to you would be keep at least 2 5-gallons as a minimum. But ideally, think about your most. This is actually a direct quote from my buddy Wrangler Star, which I love this. Think about your most capable vehicle. You know, your 4-wheel drive truck, your 4-wheel drive SUV. That's going to be more capable than your your Kia Sophia or whatever your 2-wheel drive little pizza cutter truck or car is, right? If the crap hits the fan, that's the car you're going to use to get out and do things. Whatever your gas tank size is, that's how much gas you need. So if you have a a 4Runner or a Chevy pickup like Tim and I drive that has a 30-gallon tank, you should keep 30 gallons for that. And then you should also have 2 5s available for whatever portable generators you have. And in general, I, at my house, rotate every 6 months, whether I need to or not. So I buy ethanol free. You see on this little picture here, I use those Post-it Note Extremes, and I write the date that I bought it on the Post-it Note Extreme. So in this case, you see, this is an old photo, but I bought some gas around Christmas time. I scratched that out, and when I refilled it 2 months later, I put the new date on it. And funny enough, just this past week, I sent my son out, who can now drive, to refill our 30-gallon reserve that we've got in my shed because it was 6 months old and we hadn't used much of it. So use that as a kind of a guideline for you on how much you need to store.
Just mention, Matt, that when you say when you refresh these or recycle them on a regular basis, all that means is just use it. Put it in the vehicle that you're driving all the time because it'll burn fine.
That's right. Dump it in your regular car's tank, basically. And, and it's still fine to use it at 6 months. All you're doing is making sure that it's fresh, especially as you get into wintertime, for all of us that are worried about ice and storms. Another thing that Tim and I want to spend just a minute on, and we have a couple of props on this too, is thinking about, okay, I've got power, now how am I going to cook for my family? How am I going to make sure that everybody's got a water supply, a food supply? And we mentioned the camping thing. Tim, you got me on this Everest stove. I love it. This is a fantastic little stove for camping, but in an emergency, that'd be fantastic.
It is. I mean, Camp Chef makes a couple of different stoves that have a very, very high BTU output, and you can cook just about anything you want to on there.
Yeah.
Some of the traditional, less expensive camp stoves they have very limited use.
Yeah.
But effectively, when you have a power outage, all of a sudden you are going to begin some level of camping
Yep.
in your own home.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Now, I wouldn't recommend cooking on a camp stove inside because you're not going to have proper ventilation, but hopefully you have an environment or a place where you can do some amount of cooking with some propane camp stove if you need to.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And I've heard various advice about how much water storage you should have. I think probably at a minimum you need 1 gallon per person per day of how long you're thinking that outage might be. And I'm thinking that the worst outage we've had in my 50 years of life is about a week, so I would double that and say, whatever it's going to take for me to make sure I've got at least 2 weeks for everybody in my household, including pets, that's going to be my minimum, right? So if that's, for me, a family of 6, and that's 2 weeks worth, if it's a gallon a day, that's 15 gallons, let's say.
Yeah.
Times 6.
Right.
I need to store like 60 gallons. That's not an insignificant amount of water. However, if you have a tank water heater, you have some water in your tank. So don't forget you can use that. But I still like to have some storage, and I put a couple of those storage water bins, the green ones up there next to my tri-fuel unit. Those are particularly handy because I do have a lake not that far from my house that I could farmers carry a couple of those too and grab some lake water. And then I've got a countertop gravity filtration system that actually that one was a recommendation from Wrangler Star. I could dump it into that, and now I've got bacteria and viruses and protozoas filtered out from that so that I've got multiple days beyond whatever my freshwater storage was.
Yeah, good idea.
Any additional advice on that, Tim?
No, I think that's it. I mean, just understand that, especially for those people who opt to use a tier 1 solution for their backup power, there is going to be some amount of unconventional living that's going to happen during that power outage.
That's right.
And you'll have to be adaptable to that. And
Yeah.
these tools are just that, ways to adapt to that scale back living environment.
That's right.
Yeah.
And last point on that before we move on, if you can see the white bucket there that says Mountain House on it, I'm a big fan of having some amount of dried, basically, for lack of a better term, rice and beans available, so you can get some source of carbohydrates and a little bit of protein, and you're not relying on whatever happens to be left in your pantry in an emergency situation. So I basically have one of those buckets for each person in my house.
My family has one of these meals once a month,
Do you really?
just for fun.
Oh, that's cool.
It's
Just
kinda
feel like
like-
you're camping.
That's right.
I love it. That's fantastic.
They're
I mean,
actually really good.
they're super easy.
Yeah.
Usually they just need some hot water, which you're going to get from your stove back here that we showed. So there's really nothing to it. And having at least 2 weeks, if not a month's worth of some dried food on the shelf. It doesn't need to be refrigerated. It doesn't even need to be heated and cooled. You can keep that in your garage and you're good to
And
go.
all you need is boil water.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so let's go to tier 2. That was kind of the good, the basic. Now let's go into a little bit more of really what is going to get you through a bigger crisis. So large portable generators. The tri-fuel one that you see in the back there would be considered a large, and also my 4,600 watt dual fuel that's on the ground right there. I would consider those large portable generators. The one on the ground is a dual fuel. The one up in the air here is a tri-fuel. I believe that's a 10,000 watt. A couple things to know about these. Depending on your fuel source, it is going to change the output a little bit, so don't be confused by that. It can sometimes confuse people. Like even this 22 kW right here, that's 22 kW on propane, but if it was running on natural gas, it would be slightly derated. It's usually something like 10% less power output.
Right.
On natural gas. It's just a less energy dense fuel source. So when you see different ratings or different numbers on them, don't be confused by that. But these units are big enough that we could actually figure out a system, and I'm going to show you that in a second, that we could run our whole house, or maybe not our whole house, a part of our house on these units. And let's see here. And then of course the big boy that we've got on the ground here, this is actually a newer unit from Champion. That's 22,000 watts. That is their newest version. At my house, I have the smaller version of that used to be the biggest one, which is 14 kW. And they make a few smaller than that as well. A lot of advantages for the one on the ground, because it's a fully automatic, if I'm out of town and we lose power, this thing's doing everything on its own, and it's basically automatic start, automatic transfer switch, the whole shebang. Whereas that top unit up there, it's going to require you to go outside in the storms potentially, fire the unit up and hook it up to your house. But let's talk about that briefly, because actually, Tim, you had a version of this at your house for a long time before you went to a home standby system. So what are we looking at here? What is this?
Okay, Tier 2 involves, as you said, one of the larger portable generators, but to interface that with your home, Champion makes a couple of different versions depending on the size of your generator and what you need to run inside. A 30 amp and a 50 amp interface with an automatic transfer switch and a plug receptacle where you can actually plug your generator into 3 or 4 or 5 circuits of your home.
Pretty cool, isn't
and
it?
actually run it. Now that requires some manual intervention to make it happen. It's not automatic, but the automatic portion is the transfer switch itself that actually takes the generator power and feeds it to the circuits in your home instead of the line power feeding your home. So it's smart enough to know where the power source is coming from and use those circuits.
That's pretty cool. We installed this at one of our project managers' houses not too long ago. They make them in a 30 amp and a 50 amp model, and as Tim said, that's just depending on the size of input. That also is going to give you a differing amount of circuits you can put on there, and that's going to be your emergency circuits, right? Like, for instance, if you've got a gas furnace, that gas furnace is not going to run when the power goes out unless you have power to the blower fan. So putting your gas furnace on this manual transfer switch would make a lot of sense. Putting your kitchen refrigerator on this circuit so that your kitchen refrigerator is going to continue running when the power's out makes a lot of sense. If you had a gas tankless water heater, same thing. You're going to want to hook it up here so that it'll actually be able to run when the power's out. Those are the type of circuits you need to think about. And I got a good story for you. This is a picture of me in July of 2020 when I put a Champion unit in. This is the 14 kW that's on the side of my old house. And my wife was like, "Are you sure we need to spend this money on this home standby generator? Tim only has, at the time, a portable unit that was less expensive that you'd plug in." And I said, "Honey, I really think this is going to make a big difference for us." I had small kids at home. My wife was working part-time, so I knew there was times when I was traveling and she was home alone. So I really wanted that automatic. And what you're seeing on the right there is that ATS stands for automatic transfer switch. And this is a whole house version. So this 14 kW was sized so it would basically run my entire house. Now, I did have a lot of gas utilities in that house. I had gas furnace, I had gas water heater, that sort of thing. And it wasn't a huge house. That house is 2,300 square feet, let's say. But so that's me, July 2020, where my wife's saying, "Are you sure we need to spend this money?" Well, there's my unit in February, about 7 months later, when we had that snowmageddon or whatever we called it.
And now you're a hero.
I went from a zero to a hero. She was so happy that I put that unit in. And it's funny, this photo is a little hard to see, but it's all ice, it's got snow on it. It's actually running when I took that photo. If you look back at my old videos, you could see some footage of that. And actually, let's while I'm thinking about it, Tim, let's actually pop the hood on this bad boy and show these guys what it looks like in there. Thank you, sir. So this exterior hood that you're seeing here, oops, what am I doing wrong here? Did I go it the other way?
There you go.
I locked it instead of unlocked it. This shroud that's on there is meant to protect it from the weather, and it's going to be a little hard to see, but on the left here is the exhaust, and you can kind of see that it's got a bug screen right here. This is the exhaust port on the side of it. And so the idea is that this shroud that's on there is totally protecting it from the snow, from the wind, from the rain. This engine's able to run reliably in the worst of weather on the side of my house. It doesn't have it in now because you actually have to put them in there, but there's 2 batteries that you'll put in there that will continuously trickle charge, and those batteries are able to start this thing in minus, whatever cold weather. And my unit, you can set it for an exercise level. My unit exercises on Saturday mornings at 10:30 or something in the morning, and it just runs for like 10 or 15 minutes. So it'll fire up automatically. It'll run for 10 or 15 minutes. That's going to lubricate all the seals. It's going to make sure everything works. And nowadays, I listen for it, and if for some reason I didn't hear it fire up, I would know, oh, wait a minute, I wonder what's going on with my home standby unit. I'd be able to figure out what the problem was or the service was. I've never had that happen. Since 2021, I've always had a Champion at my house. But these are fantastic. Any comments that I'm missing on this thing, Tim?
Well, as you notice, the foil lining is actually sound
Deadening.
Installation, sound deadening,
Yep.
and it really works well. You open it up and it's fairly loud,
Yeah.
but you close it up and it drops its sound level
Yeah.
quite a bit.
Yeah, it drops it down quite a bit,
Yeah.
for sure. So Tim, you've had now a home standby at your house as well for 2 years, maybe? 3 years? I can't remember when you put yours in.
About 2 years ago, I have an interesting story to tell about that. So during the first freeze that you're showing here, I had my 50 amp portable generator solution with a simple ATS integrated into the house. And so during that time, I was able to run somewhat minimal amount of devices in the house. Interestingly enough, it did run my furnace during the night because it only needed, a 20 amp
Yeah,
110 circuit,
yep,
and because it was a gas furnace.
sure.
And that was okay, but it didn't allow us to do oven cooking or
Right.
use major appliances. So subsequently, the next year, I put in the 22 kW generator with a full automatic transfer switch. And the next year, in 2022, we had the even bigger freeze, and I was out for a full week.
That's right, I forgot about that.
Long enough that on the second night, I had a neighbor leave a sign on my door that said, "I can't sleep with your generator running at night."
Is that right?
Right.
Wow.
And so what I did at 10:30 at night, I went outside, turned the generator off, plugged in the 50 amp portable generator, which
that
is
right?
super quiet,
Oh, fascinating.
and ran my furnace all night long so I could stay warm. And then at 6 o'clock the next morning,
Fired it back up.
fired up the big generator.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
So sometimes having both solutions works better.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't think about that. Neighbors. Tim and I both live in a pretty urban
Yeah.
setting. We're not rural by any means. So you got to think about that neighbor situation as well.
Yeah.
It's interesting to think about too that, I mentioned the portable power station, which is the electric
Right.
version. That can be actually inside the house. Everything else that's running any type of fuel source, whether it's natural gas, propane, gasoline, those need to be outside. And there are some solutions that you could do in terms of kind of mitigating that noise, but you've got to make sure that those are running outside. You can't run that in your garage. You cannot run that in an enclosed house. Every year somebody has a death or a severe injury because they don't think about that, and they try and run it in their garage, and those
Right.
fumes get in the house. So
Right.
be smart about that. But interesting to think about neighbor issues as well. There's my new house. I actually had natural gas at my old house. My new house, I have propane, and I don't have a good picture of it, but here's at least half of the situation. I didn't do a propane tank that was buried. In hindsight, I probably could have. I didn't think that was an option for me on that house. So Tim came up with this solution, which I love, and it's basically a little mini tank farm. I've got 100-pound propane tanks. I think I've got
10 of them, I think, don't you? Or
I have
12?
20 now.
Oh, wow.
I think I have 20 now because I have 10 in a row like little soldiers, and then I added a second row of soldiers so that I could just switch my hose. Maybe a little hard to see here, but our plumber did an amazing job. He ran a
Manifold.
cast iron manifold, right? With a drop-down hose to each one of those, and each one has its own shutoff. One thing that I did want to mention is when you think about portable generators, let me actually back out of this for 1 second, Tim. I'm going to go over to the Champion website. You do need to think about the specs on it, and we need to think about sizing the unit, and also you do want to think about gas, or not gas, I should say fuel for the actual unit. So one thing that's really cool about the Champion website, I'll show that in a sec. Let me show you this first while I'm thinking about it. Go to specs on here. So let's see, this is the one I've got at my house. This is the page that would come up. Hit the tab to specs. This will show you what the rating is. And remember I mentioned earlier, propane is going to be the rating that it calls out. So mine at my house is a true 14,000 watts. If I'd run it on natural gas, it would have been slightly smaller, 12.5. That's actually what my old house had. It'll convert that for you to 120 amps and 240 amps. But here's something that you need to think about is propane fuel consumption. And what I've found that's really, I think there's a lot of reasons to go Champion. I really like Champion. But one nice thing about Champion is they've got good fuel consumption numbers. So for instance, at a half load, my fuel consumption is 1.6 gallons per hour. And typically, in an outage, you're going to be running at half load more than full load, right? Most of the time, not everything's on.
It's a good average.
You're going to be conservative and not have every light in your house on, right? So what you want to do is take that 1.6 and multiply that by how many hours you think you want to have enough storage for, right? If I'm going to run that thing for 2 weeks, I need to go, all right, 24 hours times 14 times 1.6, that's how much storage I need to make sure I've got. And then you also need to think about, hey, if I ran it for whatever reason and didn't refill my tank, maybe I actually want a little bit more storage there. So those are the kind of calculations that you're going to do. And then the other thing I want to mention here is if we go to their Finder, let's see here. Sorry, I should have had the website up here. Check this out. They've got a home standby generator selector.
Right.
And we're going to say that we're in America. And we're going to say the size of our home. So I'll plug in this as my size. Well, I'm on propane. I've got a 200 amp source. And then it's going to list out like, hey, here's what I've got at my house. I've got a 3-ton AC. I've got an electric stove. I don't have these others, so we'll start with that. Then it's going to go, okay, here's the units that might be a good choice for you. And so this is a great little selector. The other nice thing about this on a different part of their website is it'll on a portable generator, actually I'll show it to you. I know how to get to it, sorry. 1 second, y'all. Here we go. So if we go to the generator, we're going to say, okay, what are we going to use it for? You know, recreation. Okay, great. I've got an RV with a 15,000 BTU system. I'm going to run my LED TV. I'm going to run my RV refrigerator and probably a blender. And now let's see what my wattage needs are with just those items going. So check that out. 1,800 running watts, 4,000 starting watts. So that unit that I've got on the ground that I mentioned that I use a lot, that has that 30 amp plug, this is saying, hey, that's for what you're going to use on your RV, that's the perfect model. It looks like I may have a slightly older model. This frame looks a little different than mine, but it's going to say you want to use typically that size unit. Isn't that cool? I like that. It's helpful because I think a lot of times we don't realize how many watts we're using or might want to use when we're running.
I think it's important to point out, though, Matt, that different portable generators, even though they have ratings at 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 7,000 watts, whatever they are, at some point in there, they distribute not just 110 voltage, but they have a 220 output. Mm-hmm. So you can then run dual pole circuits. Whereas the smaller generators, even though the capacity might be large enough to supply, let's say, one air conditioner, they don't supply that circuitry to run air conditioning compressors sometimes. Sometimes that takes 220 volts. So that's another consideration for choosing a generator is which circuits you need to feed.
Yeah, that's right. Tim, let's move on to home battery systems. Having a portable generator or an automatic home standby generator, another option could be a home battery system.
It could be.
We put a Tesla Powerwall in. I'm trying to think there's at least 4 or 5 other brands. Franklin Batteries is one that I've seen on job sites. Those are also fully automatic. They automatically transfer over, especially when you're using a span panel. They can make it really easy to know your loads and to shed loads if necessary. But there are some cons to that too, aren't there?
There are. I mean, for short periods of time, a whole house battery backup system can supply at least some portions of your home. It's challenging to find a battery system that will feed your entire home as if there were no power outage. It's not a substitute for a generator. It's a stopgap measure. So imagine using it for a few hours during a critical period of time. But after that, if you're running your entire house, the battery will be used up. Now, there are a few exceptions to that, but they are very expensive.
Yeah.
New manufacturers are coming online all the time. Champion's working on a battery, whole house battery backup system as we speak, and I don't know how long it'll be before they come out with it, but I think it's on there.
Wouldn't be surprised that'll come.
Yeah.
And then next, let's jump into solar arrays. We've had a lot of clients over the years that have added solar.
Almost every client now.
Yeah, just about everybody.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing about solar is, as a backup system, it's not really designed or intended to be your sole source of power. In general, the solar arrays are a grid-tied solar array that's using the grid mainly and feeding back when it's beneficial.
Well, many municipalities, especially here in Central Texas, the power companies won't let you use the solar directly. They meter it, they buy it from you, then they sell it back to you.
Yep.
So it's primarily meant for supplementing your incoming line power and just making you use less line power.
Yep.
In a power outage, unless you have a battery backup system, and it has to be a fairly robust one, your solar doesn't do anything really to help you that much.
Yeah.
And then in that case, you need a generator to supplement or to enhance the working of the other two. Imagine for a second, the generator is your line power. When you have a power outage, the generator becomes your line power.
Yep.
And then your solar and your battery backup work in conjunction with that as sort of a buffer.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's a great way to say it. And that gets us to tier 3, Tim, which is really integrating generation and storage systems. And this is really kind of the ultimate, right? This is definitely where a lot of our clients are going, where I think a lot of people are leaning towards. But of course, this is also the most resilient and also the most upfront cost.
There is, and we haven't used the term yet, but we might as well use it, off-grid. We do have some clients that are interested in creating a scenario or a situation or a home condition that could be off-grid. They don't necessarily want to be off-grid. They want to be connected to line power, but they want the comfort and the assurance that if there is a long-term power outage, that they can continue on with their lifestyle without any interruption.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Let's look at a kind of an example of what that might look like. I like this little diagram. It's saying, the way that line power might come in could be from the pole. It could be batteries also used during peak billing hours. In the meantime, we're going to have some solar that's going to be providing power, and we might be able to feed that back into the grid. But then, if any of those systems go down, we've also got this generator, which is not in use 99% of the time, frankly. But when you need it, boy, is it nice to have. And I think we're all thinking that at some point the world is going to be an emissions-free, lack of fossil fuel type world. We're just not there yet. I mean, it's going to take some decades for us to get what we need in terms of batteries, in terms of solar, and continuing to make that affordable for our younger clients. That's going to be the hard part.
Yeah, we just don't have the storage system yet.
Yep. It's getting there, but it's not there yet.
Little connectivity problem here.
Yep, I see them. Y'all seeing my slides over there?
Come back up. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
So then when the utilities go off, then that's when that generator really makes a difference, and those batteries are basically feeding. So let me go back a slide in case you guys didn't see it. Utilities, when the utilities are on, we're getting line power. That's our main source of power, but maybe our batteries are helping us during peak billing hours, especially if we've got net metering or metering that's based on hours of the day. But then when that utility goes off, the generator kicks in and does what it needs to do. It maybe recharges those batteries during nighttime when those batteries aren't helpful. Maybe that generator doesn't need to run all the time, but thinking about this as a holistic system means that really eventually we could get to that truly kind of off-grid situation.
Right. And to enhance this Tier 3 option, there are integrated power solution control systems that sense where the power is coming from and tell which device to take over and feed power to the house.
Yeah.
Now that's a fairly robust and expensive system. If you're building a new home and you want complete comfort that when there is a long-term power outage, your lifestyle won't be interrupted that much, then it probably takes that level of intelligent control to manage all of these different power systems effectively.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I'll tell you something interesting. I don't have a battery backup in my house. I do have this generator in my backyard. And the last time we had a power outage, which was only for a day, maybe less than a year ago, I came home from work and walked into the house, and my wife was cooking dinner, and I said, "What's that noise?" She said, "What noise?" She doesn't hear as well as I do. And I stuck my head out the back door, and the generator was running.
She didn't even know the generator was on.
And so a neighbor had called her at 10 o'clock that morning and said, "Is your power out?" And she said, "No, my power's not out. It's working fine."
She didn't even know it was
She didn't
running.
know the power had gone out for the whole neighborhood. It's only like a 10 or 15 second delay, and the automatic transfer switch kicks in, turns your generator on,
Yes.
and we had no idea.
Feels so good.
Yeah.
Feels so good to have that work. That
Yeah.
ATS is amazing.
It is.
Amazing. What can we tell people in terms of sizing, Tim? Because you're much better on the electrical side of things than I am, and I feel like the older I get, the more I start to understand it. But it took me a while to try and figure out, how much could I run? How many circuits could be on there? 22 kW seems like some massive number, but for a lot of houses, that you still might not have every circuit on an emergency circuit as if you were, running every light in the house. Give us a little bit of generic advice on size.
Well, generic being the operative word, it's a complex discussion to have about sizing, depending upon the size of your home and what your expectations are and what you want to do when your power is out. But for 22 kW, it would supply most everything that you need under normal, especially wintertime conditions when you're running a heat pump and just general appliances in your house. You do have to be a little sensitive that if you load your house up with both double ovens running at the same time, that's a massive amount of power at one time.
Yeah.
If you have both air conditioners or both heaters running at the same time, so if you have two air conditioners, maybe shut one off,
Yeah.
right? If you're using electric cooking, only use one burner at a time or one oven at a time. So
Right.
you have to. Now, that being said, there are smart panels that you can add to supplement the generator that will automatically figure out what your current load is, and it will make sure it stays below whatever your generator rating is. Or at least you can program it that way.
Right.
So the answer is for 95% of the homes in the country, 22 kW is plenty.
Yeah.
And the difference between the cost, the footprint, and the consumption of a 22 kW is not that much more than a 14.
Yeah.
So I would always recommend people go to the next size up.
Yeah.
It's really worth the assurance that it's going to be there when you need it.
That's right.
Yeah.
A side note, we didn't talk about this, but this is an engine that runs just like your car engine, just like your your lawnmower engine. There's oil in there. There is some maintenance. If I remember correctly, the maintenance is an hour-related maintenance, and I think it's 100 hours of run time when you need to change that oil. So keep that in mind. Champion's done a good job of making that relatively easy to do. I changed the oil on mine.
Super easy, yeah.
But you also need to factor in your exercise time. And so, if you're exercising 15 minutes a week, remember that's 2 hours a month. So over the course of a year, that's 24 hours of run time, let's say. So you're gonna, if you didn't have an outage where you used it, you probably need to change that oil every 2 years or so. Also think about using full. I'm a big fan of full synthetic.
Definitely.
Yeah. Don't cheap out on your oil for that, and also get the good batteries for it too. Because remember, this has starting batteries, just like your car has a starting battery. So double check those. I like to write the date on batteries. I feel like the heat in Texas kills batteries, and I prophylactically change my car batteries every 3 years, whether they're needed or not. Just because I don't want to have that issue of my wife coming out and not starting the car when I can't help her jump it. Anything you want to add on maintenance or any of that sort of thing?
No, I mean, there's a kit you can buy that I would keep an extra kit on the shelf so that when it came time to do the maintenance, it was right there, easy. You didn't have to order anything and wait for it when you don't have time to do it later.
Yeah.
But I always keep an extra maintenance kit, with an air filter, a spark plug, 2 quarts of oil, and a filter.
Yeah, great point.
Right on one shelf.
Great point. Another thing that I want to mention too is that Champion website that we were on earlier. I think it's championpowerequipment.com. There is a finder on there, so if you're buying portable equipment or buying a standby, they can direct you to somebody locally. There's a lot of retailers for these as well. I don't even want to mention because there's so many places you could buy them. But think ahead, right? I mean, even if you're just using a suitcase generator like where I started to have as a backup or to use for your camping, get it before you need it and before that deadline comes. It was incredibly hard to find anything when it came to generators during that freeze that we had a couple years ago. And every time a hurricane hits the Gulf Coast, the stores locally sell out. And that seems to be the time when the rest of the U.S. thinks about it. So think about that now. Make sure you can get what you need lined up. And take a little time to think about what else you need for your family in terms of water and food. And what if I do if my water supply runs out? What are my backup plans for going to someone else's house? Or frankly, having people over to your house? That was a big backup plan for me. I have in-laws that I made plans with them for how to get to my house because I knew that I had a Champion backup generator at my house. I didn't want them going to a hotel. So these are things that we can think about ahead of time and be prepared for.
Yeah, I think that there's been a lot of discussion about the topic of resiliency in the last 4 or 5 years and what that means to our culture. People understand more now about being able to survive catastrophic events and to bounce back afterwards.
Yeah.
A lot of that has to do with how well you're prepared when those things happen.
That's right.
And so, and I will also say one more point, that redundancy helps improve your resiliency. So having more than one system, or assuming that your primary system will fail at some point, and having a backup system just improves your ability to weather those storms.
That's right.
So if you have a whole house generator or a large portable generator, think about having a large battery bank also to get you through that period of time while you're figuring out what to do about the primary source.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And last point that I think I want to make that I don't quite know how to phrase this, but I've been thinking about this, and I think this is worth a video at some point. I think that a well-built house leads to less dependence on go-go gadgets to make sure that I don't have problems. I'm not saying that I didn't put a generator at my new house, for instance, but my new house is so much more resilient, so much warmer in the wintertime and cooler in the summertime. It's so much better insulated and airtight that I can go through nature's extremes without having to have a big engine, let's say, to cool down my house in July, or a giant furnace to heat my house in the wintertime. So there is a certain amount of resiliency and energy independence that comes from having a modestly sized, well-built house. That I think is the X factor that when it comes to these units. I mean, a not very well-built house that's leaky and has bad insulation, you're gonna need a lot of heat, you're gonna need a lot of cooling, you're gonna need a lot of everything to keep that house comfortable in the event of a power outage. So by building a much better house, you're gonna have less need for the biggest unit they make, or multiple units, or multiple whatever. So that's something that I think I've only started really realizing after I built my new house, Tim.
Right. And that speaks to having well-qualified, reputable contractors help you install all these systems.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. A lot of the things we can do ourselves, and most of us and your listeners are smart people,
Yep.
and they can figure a lot of this
Yeah.
out. But certainly licensed electricians can go a long way toward these things working reliably and them not.
Yeah,
Yep.
for sure. We actually answered a bunch of questions behind the scenes with the Champion folks that were helping. But Maureen wants to know, will we be posting this webinar? Yes, we're filming this live, but this will be on our website and our YouTube channel before too long. So stay tuned for that. And in the future, we would love to have you guys be notified of these webinars. And the best way to do that is to sign up for our newsletter link. In the description, wherever you're watching this below, is going to be a newsletter link. Or you could also go to thebuildshow.com and where is that tab? It's probably in the hamburger menu, and then drop down to sign up for a newsletter. If you sign up for that newsletter, my team is going to send you 2 emails a week. We send an email on Tuesdays and Fridays that says basically, here's what's new on the site this week. Because you know we're publishing like 14 or 15 new videos every week from our 15 contributors. It's a lot of content, and it's hard to keep up sometimes with what's new. But I love getting that newsletter, frankly, because I can scroll down and go, oh, what should I use? This series by Jake Bruton on insulation. This looks like a great video. Click. Let me take time to watch this now while I've got a few minutes. Or you can come back to that in the future. So anyways, sign up for that. That's how we also notify people about these live events. And we'd love to have you guys ask questions on these. And thank you for those that took the time to do the event live. Oh, interesting. We got one last one coming in that I'll answer. John Taylor says, Matt, in your new house, did you consider creating a large thermal mass inside your house that would radiate heat when heaters are not on, or cooling when AC is not on? Yes and no. We like to do that in every house in some ways, John. You know, for instance, for years we've always preached why we should go thicker on our drywall because it's got more thermal mass. And I haven't done this, but I've always thought it would be really cool to have a big, like a soapstone type hearth fireplace area that if you did have a wood stove, let's say, it would be able to soak up that heat and radiate that heat out. Now we're in a cooling dominated climate, so for us to worry about heating season is not really there for us. Cooling, on the other hand, though, for us, instead of thermal mass, it's enough surfaces that are going to get cool on the inside, but also thinking about shading on the outside. You know, I've got 2-foot overhangs on everything on my house. I really spend a lot of time thinking about tree placement and solar heat gain on my house and reducing that to reduce my cooling load. So I guess the answer is yes and no on that front, but I think it does make a lot of sense, John, and lighter weight houses tend to move temperature more rapidly than heavier weight houses. It's also one of the reasons why we really like to insulate to at least 50% better than code, and as much of that as we can get on the outside of the house as possible to keep the structure in the thermal envelope like I did at my house is definitely the way to go, and like we're doing at the Reisinger build now.
Right, that's
with that rooftop insulation.
Right.
Great webinar, Tim. Thank you. Appreciate the time.
Thank you, Matt.
I think I could always talk about resiliency and backup whatever at any time. It's really fun.
I agree.
Big thanks to Champion for sponsoring. A quick note on these guys. They're an interesting company. They've got a huge product catalog. They tend to be pretty well priced. I would say they're very competitive on their pricing. And I found their equipment to be quite reliable. You can find some more expensive brands. You can find frankly, some cheaper brands. They seem to be at a really good price point. They've got a really big catalog. As you can see, we've got a lot of their equipment. We use it on our job sites. We use it tailgating. We use it camping. We use it for backup power. They're a great company to work with. And if you've got questions, if you have concerns, if you have issues, reach out to them. I've talked to lots of people over the years that have said, hey, I had a issue with my unit, or I had a question, and they got right back to me. So they seem to have really, really good customer service. So big thanks to Champion for sponsoring. They've been a multiple year sponsor of the Build Show, and we really like those guys. With that being said, Tim, follow us on Facebook or Instagram. Otherwise, we'll see you next time on the Build Show.